After my wife passed away, her two sons demanded it, all the estate, the company, every last asset. My lawyer urged me to fight. I refused. I told him to hand everything over. People whispered the grief had broken me. At the final hearing, I signed without hesitation. They smiled in victory until their attorney froze while reading what I'd actually given them. They thought I'd given up. They had no idea what was coming. But before we continue, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Let's see how far this story reaches. The leather chair in Lorraine's office still held the faint scent of her perfume, something floral and warm that used to greet me every evening when I'd find her here reading by lamplight. 3 days since her funeral, and I couldn't bring myself to sit anywhere else. The morning light through the bay windows cast long shadows across the mahogany desk, illuminating dust motes that danced like memories I couldn't quite grasp. I heard them before I saw them. Preston's expensive loafers clicking against the hardwood floors of our Beacon Hill brownstone. My brownstone, I reminded myself, though the thought felt hollow. Then Daniela's lighter steps, hesitant as if she knew what was coming would require careful footing. They appeared in the doorway together, a united front. Preston wore a suit I didn't recognize. Charcoal gray, probably Italian, definitely new. The kind of suit a man wears when he wants to look successful, or when he's pretending to be. Daniela clutched a designer handbag against her side like a shield, her knuckles white against the leather. Neither met my eyes. Leonard. Preston's voice carried that particular tone. I'd heard him use in courtroom footage, measured professional, completely devoid of warmth. Not Dad, which he'd called me at the funeral just 3 days ago, when other people were watching. Just Leonard. We need to discuss some practical matters. Daniela added, her smile brittle as winter ice. She perched on the edge of Lorraine's reading chair, the one by the window where my wife used to sit and watch the neighborhood come alive each morning. I nodded, unable to find words. What was there to say? The woman I'd loved for 22 years was gone. And her children. The children I'd tried so hard to be a father to were here to discuss practical matters before her absence had even settled into permanence. Preston pulled a folder from his leather briefcase with the efficiency of a man conducting business. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. The estate needs to be settled. Mom's assets, the properties, the business interests. There are legal structures in place that require immediate attention. He laid papers across Lorraine's desk, each one a small violence against her memory. I recognized her handwriting on some of them, those graceful loops and curves that used to leave me love notes on the bathroom mirror. The house here in Boston. Preston began his finger tapping a property assessment form. Current market value, $2.1 million. The villa at Big Sioux, $2.65 million. And Foster Construction, which you built, of course, but which Mom held joint ownership of, appraised at $1.1 million. Each number landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through my chest. These assets, he continued. And I noticed how he avoided saying your assets or the family assets, just these assets, as if they were stock portfolios, rather than the home where Lorraine and I had celebrated 22 anniversaries, the villa, where we'd renewed our vows overlooking the Pacific, the company that bore my name and my life's work. According to the will, Daniela interjected, her voice carrying a rehearsed gentleness that made my skin crawl. These properties passed to Preston and myself. Mom was very clear about her intentions. I looked up, then studied their faces. Preston's jaw was set, his gray eyes so like his mother's, yet lacking all her warmth, fixed somewhere over my left shoulder. Daniela at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, though. Whether from guilt or mere awkwardness, I couldn't tell. And me? I asked quietly. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, like it belonged to someone older, more defeated than I felt inside. Preston's expression didn't change. Naturally, there's the life insurance policy, $450,000. That should be sufficient for your needs going forward. Sufficient for my needs. As if 22 years of marriage, of partnership, of building a life together could be quantified and deemed sufficient with a single insurance payout. I thought of Lorraine in those final weeks when the cancer had stolen her strength, but not her spirit. She'd held my hand in the hospital bed, her grip surprisingly firm despite everything. Since I've taken care of everything, she'd whispered, her voice rough from medication. You'll never have to worry. Had she known what her children were planning? There are, of course, some outstanding medical expenses. Preston continued consulting another document. The mom's final treatments, the hospice care. The insurance covered most of it, but there's approximately $425,000 remaining. The number hit me like a physical blow. $450 Mauros $425,000, $25,000. That's what 22 years of marriage apparently amounted to in their ledger. Daniela leaned forward. Her expression arranged into something she probably thought looked sympathetic. We know this is difficult, Leonard. But Mom always intended for the family assets to stay within the bloodline. You understand, don't you? It's not personal. Not personal. The words echoed in the sudden silence of the room. Not personal that they were taking everything. Not personal that they'd waited exactly 3 days after burying their mother to deliver this news. Not personal that they stood in her office surrounded by her books and her photographs and the life we'd built together and told me I was being evicted from my own existence. I said nothing. What could I say? That I'd loved their mother more than my own life. That I'd held her hand through every chemotherapy session while they sent flowers and made excuses about busy schedules. That in 22 years, I'd never once made her feel like anything less than cherished. Preston stood, apparently taking my silence for agreement. We're not heartless, he said, though nothing in his tone suggested otherwise. We'll give you 30 days to make arrangements. We think that's more than fair. Fair, another word that seemed to have lost all meaning. Our attorneys will be in touch. Daniela added, already moving toward the door, eager to escape the weight of what they'd just done. Gerald Peaton will handle all the paperwork. He'll make this as smooth as possible. They left me there in Lorraine's chair, surrounded by the ghosts of a life that apparently no longer belonged to me. Through the window, I watched them climb into Preston's BMW, another new acquisition I noticed. They didn't look back at the house. Why would they? It was already theirs in their minds. The morning sun had shifted, and now the light fell differently across the desk, illuminating something I hadn't noticed before. The corner of an envelope tucked beneath Lorraine's desk, bladder my name in her handwriting, and something else, the edge of a small brass key. My hand trembled as I reached for it. The words hung in the air between us, $25,000, and I watched Preston's face for any flicker of recognition. Any acknowledgement that what he just said was absurd. But his expression remained unchanged, professional, as if he'd just quoted the price of a used sedan, rather than the sum total of my future. He cleared his throat, a small sound that somehow felt rehearsed. I know this seems complicated, Leonard, but you have to understand Mom was very deliberate in her planning. She worked with her attorneys for months to ensure everything was structured properly. Structured properly, I repeated, tasting the words. They felt foreign in my mouth. Corporate jargon applied to the dissolution of a marriage, a life, a family. It's not personal, Preston continued. And something in his tone shifted, became almost gentle, as if he were explaining something to a child who couldn't quite grasp basic mathematics. Mom always intended for the family assets to stay within the bloodline. She was very clear about that. These properties, the business, they've been in the family for generations, in a sense. It's about legacy, about keeping things where they belong, bloodline. The word landed differently than the numbers had. The numbers had been abstract, shocking in their magnitude, but somehow distant. This was intimate. This was personal, despite what Preston claimed. 22 years of marriage and I wasn't part of the bloodline. 22 years of birthday parties and Christmas mornings and quiet Sunday breakfasts. 22 years of holding Lorraine when she cried about her father's death. Of celebrating when Preston made partner at his firm, of helping Daniela move into her first office space. 22 years of being called dad at family gatherings, of signing cards, as love mom and dad, of believing I belonged, but I wasn't blood. And apparently that was all that mattered in the end. I glanced past Preston toward the doorway and noticed for the first time that we weren't alone. Bethany stood just beyond the threshold, Preston's wife of 7 years, watching our exchange with an expression I couldn't quite read. Her eyes moved slowly across the room, taking in the built-in bookshelves Lorraine had commissioned, the vintage Persian rug we'd found at an estate sale in Cambridge. The Steinway piano in the corner that neither of us played but that Lorraine had insisted made the house feel alive. Bethy's gaze was calculating, cataloging, already measuring curtains in her mind, perhaps already planning which furniture would stay and which would go. She caught me looking and had the grace to glance away, but not before I saw something flicker across her face. Not guilt exactly, more like the expression of someone who just won a bet they'd placed months ago. Of course we understand this is difficult, Daniela said, her voice pulling my attention back. She'd moved closer, perching now on the arm of Lorraine's favorite reading chair. A liberty that felt like a violation, though I couldn't articulate why. Or losing a parent. She paused, seemed to catch herself, then pushed forward. Losing a spouse is one of life's hardest challenges, but Mom would want us to handle this as a family. She'd want the people she loved to have what belongs to them, the people she loved. As if I were somehow separate from that category. As if 22 years of devotion had been a pleasant interlude rather than the central fact of both our lives. When Lorraine was in the hospital, I said, quietly surprised by my own voice. Those last few weeks, she mentioned something about papers, personal documents she'd been organizing. She said she'd put everything in order that I'd understand when the time came. The change in the room was immediate. Daniela's smile froze, became somehow more rigid. Preston's eyes sharpened, and he exchanged a glance with his sister that lasted less than a second, but spoke volumes. What kind of papers? Preston asked, his tone carefully neutral. She didn't specify, just said she'd taken care of everything, made sure all the details were handled. I watched them both carefully as I spoke. I assumed she meant the medical directives, the funeral arrangements. But now I wonder if she meant something else. Another glance between the siblings, quicker this time. Daniela shifted her weight, and I heard the leather of the chair creak softly. Mom was very thorough, Preston said finally. I'm sure whatever papers you're thinking of are included in the estate documents. Gerald will have everything. There's no need for you to worry about tracking down old files or correspondence. But there was something in the way he said it, too quickly, too smoothly, that made my instincts prickle. After 40 years in construction, I'd learned to recognize when someone was trying to sell me something I didn't need or talk me out of something I did. Of course, I said, keeping my voice even. I'm sure you're right. Preston stood then, brushing invisible lint from his expensive trousers, a gesture I'd seen him make countless times when he was ready to end a conversation on his terms. Our attorneys will be in touch within the next few days. Gerald Peaton. You remember him from the estate planning meetings. He'll handle all the paperwork. Very efficient, very professional. He'll make this whole process as painless as possible. Painless. As if pain were something that could be managed with the right legal documents and a firm handshake. Daniela rose as well, already gathering her handbag, already mentally out the door. We really are sorry, Leonard, for your loss for all of this. She gestured vaguely at the room, at the situation, at the wreckage of what had been just days ago my life. We'll give you space to process everything. They moved toward the door in unison, Preston's hand finding the small of Daniela's back, in a gesture that was probably meant to be comforting, but looked more like hurting. Bethany stepped aside to let them pass, then followed without a word, without a backward glance. I listened to their footsteps receding down the hallway, heard the heavy front door open and close with its familiar solid thunk. Through the window, I watched Preston's BMW pull away from the curb, watched it disappear around the corner onto Charles Street. The house settled into silence around me. The old brownstone had its own sounds. The tick of the radiator, the whisper of wind through the eaves, the distant hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, sounds I'd lived with for 2 decades, sounds that were apparently no longer mine to hear. I sat alone in Lorraine's chair in Lorraine's office, in what would soon be someone else's house, and let the weight of that single word settle over me like snow. Bloodline. I wasn't part of it. I had never been part of it, and 22 years of love had not been enough to change that fundamental fact. They left at dusk. I watched from the living room window as Preston's Lexus pulled away Daniela in the passenger seat, both of them silent. The taillights disappeared around the corner and I was alone. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt hollowed out. The house was too quiet, not the peaceful quiet I'd grown accustomed to in the weeks after Lorraine's death, but something heavier accusatory, as if the walls themselves were asking me what I was going to do now. I wandered through the rooms, touching things Lorraine's favorite chair by the window, the bookshelf she'd organized by color, instead of author the kitchen table where we'd eaten breakfast together for 22 years. Everything felt fragile, temporary, as if it might vanish the moment I looked away. Preston's words kept circling back. $25,000. The life insurance he'd said was already spoken for. The house would need to be sold to settle debts I'd never heard of. Lorraine's estate, according to him, was a carefully managed disaster, and I was the last to know. But something didn't sit right. Lorraine had been deliberate about everything. Her coffee routine, her garden beds, the way she folded laundry. She wouldn't have left chaos behind, not intentionally. I found myself standing in her office, a small room off the hallway that she'd claimed as her own years ago. The desk was still covered with her things. A stack of unopened mail, a coffee mug with lipstick stains, a framed photo of the two of us on our wedding day. I sat down in her chair, the leather creaking under my weight. The desk drawers were locked, but I knew where she kept the key taped to the underside of the top drawer. A trick she'd learned from her mother. I pulled it free and unlocked the first drawer. Inside were files, lots of them. Tax returns, bank statements, insurance documents, all neatly labeled and organized. I flipped through them slowly, looking for anything unusual. Then I found it. A manila envelope tucked beneath a stack of old utility bills. It was sealed, and on the front, in Lorraine's handwriting, were 3 words. When you're ready. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a photocopy of a bank statement I didn't recognize. The account number was partially redacted, but the balance wasn't 1274832. And beneath it a handwritten note, Leonard. This is just the beginning. Keep looking. Trust no one but Gerald. And remember, I always protected what mattered most. L. I stared at the note for a long time, my heart pounding in my chest. There was more. There had to be. I searched the rest of the drawers, pulling out files, receipts, old letters. In the back of the bottom drawer, I found a small brass key attached to a red ribbon. No label, no explanation, but it was deliberate. Lorraine didn't leave things lying around by accident. I slipped the key into my pocket and kept searching. In her wallet, tucked in the back of a desk organizer, I found something else, a bank card I'd never seen before. On the back, in faded blue ink, was a 10-digit number written in Lorraine's hand. Not a phone number, not an account number I recognized, but it meant something. I sat back in the chair, the pieces scattered around me like a puzzle I didn't yet know how to solve. Preston and Daniela had come here with documents, with legal language, with the confidence of people who believed they knew everything. But Lorraine had left breadcrumbs and I was going to follow them. I called Gerald Peaton the next morning. He answered on the second ring, his voice cautious. "Leonard, how are you holding up? I need to ask you something," I said, skipping the pleasantries. Did Lorraine ever mention setting up accounts I didn't know about, trusts? Maybe separate bank accounts? There was a pause. "Then why do you ask?" "Because I found a bank statement in her desk, an account I've never seen, and a key I don't recognize." Gerald was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was careful. "Leonard, I think you should come to my office. There are things we need to discuss in person." What things Lorraine may have put in place without telling anyone, including me? My grip tightened on the phone. "When this afternoon, 2 hours. And Leonard, bring everything you found. Don't mention this to Preston or Daniela." Not yet. I hung up and stared at the brass key in my hand. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second louder than the last. Outside, the radiator hissed as it kicked on, and somewhere in the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed its familiar tune. But this time the sounds didn't feel like ghosts. They felt like a countdown. Tomorrow, I would go to Gerald's office. Tomorrow, I would start asking the questions Lorraine had left unanswered. And tomorrow, I would find out exactly what my wife had been protecting me from. Morning traffic on A93 was lighter than expected for a Tuesday. I'd left early, unable to sleep, the brass key on my nightstand, catching first light like a small accusation. Now navigating through the financial district, the city felt sharper, more real than it had in days. Gerald Peaton's office occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower on Federal Street. I'd been here once before, years ago, when Lorraine and I updated our wills. Back then it felt like a formality. Now waiting for the elevator in the marble lobby. It felt like walking into an examination I hadn't studied for. The elevator climbed smoothly. A young woman beside me thumbed through emails on her phone, absorbed in ordinary concerns like meetings and deadlines. I envied the ability to worry about normal things rather than brass keys and bloodlines. Gerald's receptionist recognized me. "Mr. Foster, he's expecting you. Go right in." His office overlooked Boston Harbor, water gray-blue under morning clouds. Ships moved slowly across the channel, their purpose clear, destinations mapped. I envied their certainty. Leonard Una Gerald stood from behind an expensive desk, 50-ish, carefully groomed, accepting his receding hairline with grace. But his usual composure was cracked, replaced by genuine concern. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." I took the leather chair across from him. Through the window behind Gerald, I could see Logan Airport in the distance, planes taking off in orderly patterns. "I'll get straight to it," Gerald said, folding his hands. "I've been reviewing the estate documents Preston sent, and Leonard, something isn't right. This will doesn't track with what I know about Lorraine's intentions." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "I mean you have grounds to contest this. Strong grounds." He pulled out a file, laid papers across the desk with careful precision. "Under Massachusetts law, a surviving spouse is entitled to protections. This will essentially disinherit you while you are clearly married and cohabitating. It raises serious red flags. Legal language blurred together, whereas and heretofore and notwithstanding a contest would take time." Gerald continued. 6 months minimum could stretch to a year. Legal fees, $50,000–$60,000, maybe more, if Preston fights hard, which he will. He paused. "But Leonard, you'd have a real chance. Why would Lorraine write me out like this if she loved me?" Gerald's expression softened. "That's exactly my point. I knew Lorraine saw how she talked about you at firm holiday parties, how she looked at you. This will doesn't sound like her. He chose his words carefully. It reads like someone else wrote it and she signed, or like there's another will somewhere that supersedes this one. The brass key burned against my thigh through my pocket. Before I could respond, Gerald's phone rang. He glanced at caller ID, jaw tightening. "It's Preston." "Answer it," I said. He pressed speaker. "Preston." "Gerald." "Good morning." Preston's voice filled the office, smooth as expensive scotch. "Just checking the timeline. Has Leonard signed the transfer documents?" "We'd really like to move forward quickly. Better for everyone involved." Gerald's eyes stayed on mine. "I'm meeting with Leonard now, discussing his options." A pause, brief but telling. His options. "Gerald, the will is clear, we just need signatures." Preston. "I think there are questions about questions." Preston's voice sharpened. "What kind of questions? Mom's wishes were explicit." "She worked with your firm 15 years. Are you suggesting problems with documents you prepared?" "I'm suggesting," Gerald said, voice cooling, "that Leonard deserves time to fully understand his legal position before making irreversible decisions." Another pause longer. I could almost hear Preston recalculating. Of course, he said, finally, smoothness returning. "Leonard should take all the time he needs." "We're not rushing anyone. It's just these things drag on without proper attention to paperwork. Mom wouldn't have wanted that." "I'll call you back, Preston." Gerald disconnected without waiting for response. Heavy silence. Gerald leaned back, studying me with lawyer's eyes. "He's worried. People confident in their position don't push that hard that fast." I thought about Preston and Daniela's exchanged glances when I mentioned Lorraine's papers. Daniela dropping her wine glass. Bethy's calculating look surveying the house. People hiding something. "Gerald," I said slowly, "if I wanted to just let this go, give them everything without a fight, how quickly could that happen?" Shock crossed his face. "Leonard, you can't be serious. How quickly? Days a week at most." "But why would you even consider?" "What if fighting would destroy me even if I won?" I interrupted carefully. "What if the cost, not just money, but time, energy? What it would do to my relationship with Lorraine's children? What if that was too high?" Gerald leaned forward, pleading. "Now, Leonard, in 30 years of practice, I've never advised a client to walk away from a 7-figure inheritance without a fight. There has to be more to this, something you're not telling me. The brass key, the envelope. When you're ready." Lorraine's hand in the hospital. I've taken care of everything. But I wasn't ready to share those things. Not until I understood what they meant. "I'm tired, Gerald," I said. And it wasn't entirely a lie. Tired of being the outsider trying to claim a place in a family that never wanted me there. Maybe it's easier to let go. Let them have what they think they deserve and build something new. Gerald stared for a long moment, lawyer's brain working through possibilities, trying to find the angle I wasn't showing. Finally, he sighed. "If that's what you want, I'll draw up papers. But Leonard, please sleep on this. Don't make final decisions when you're raw from grief." I extended my hand. "Thank you, Gerald, for caring enough to question this." He shook it firmly, expression still troubled. "If you change your mind, I know where to find you." In the elevator going down, I touched the brass keys outlined through my pocket. Gerald was right about one thing. There was more to this story. Much more. And somewhere Lorraine had left me the clues to find it. I just had to figure out what lock this key opened. Gerald's office was in a brick building near CPP Police Square, the kind of place that smelled like old paper and furniture polish. I'd been here before years ago, when Lorraine and I had drawn up our wills. Back then it had felt routine. Now it felt like walking into enemy territory. Gerald met me at the door, his handshake firm, his expression guarded. He gestured toward a conference room, and I followed him inside. The brass key and the bank card were in my jacket pocket. I could feel their weight with every step. We sat across from each other, a polished mahogany table between us. Gerald folded his hands and waited. I took out the key and the card and placed them on the table. Lorraine left these, I said, along with a bank statement for an account I've never heard of. I need to know what they're for. Gerald picked up the key, turning it over in his fingers. This looks like a safety deposit box key. Do you know which bank I think it might be? First National on Newberry Street. That's where the card is from. He nodded slowly. And you haven't been there yet? Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Gerald set the key down and leaned back in his chair. Leonard, I'm going to be very direct with you. If Lorraine set up accounts or assets you didn't know about, she did it for a reason. And if Preston and Daniela don't know about them, that's also deliberate. What are you saying? I'm saying your wife may have been protecting you from them. The words hung between us. Why would she need to? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Because she didn't trust them, Gerald said simply, and neither should you. I thought about the conversation 3 days ago. Preston's smooth explanations, Daniela's sympathetic nods the way they'd handed me documents as if I were a child who needed guidance. They said the estate is a mess, I said. That Lorraine left debts. That the life insurance is already allocated. Gerald's jaw tightened. Did they show you documentation? Some, not everything. Leonard listened to me carefully. If Lorraine suspected that her sons might try to control the estate after her death, she would have taken steps, legal steps. She was a smart woman. She wouldn't have left you vulnerable. So what do I do? Gerald leaned forward. First, you go to that bank, open the safety deposit box, see what's inside. Second, you bring me everything. Statements, documents, anything Lorraine left behind. And third, you don't sign anything Preston or Daniela put in front of you. Not until I've reviewed it. I knotted my throat tight. There's something else, Gerald said quietly. If Lorraine moved assets into accounts you didn't know about, that means she may have created a trust or a secondary will, something filed separately. I can check with the probate court, but it'll take time. How much time? A few days, maybe a week. I looked down at the key and the card on the table. Such small things, but they felt like lifelines. Do you think she knew I asked that they'd come after me like this? Gerald's expression softened. I think she knew exactly what kind of people they were. And I think she loved you enough to make sure they couldn't take everything. I picked up the key and slipped it back into my pocket. Then I'll go to the bank tomorrow morning, I said. Good. And Leonard. Gerald's voice stopped me as I stood. Be careful. If there's money involved, people do desperate things, even family. I nodded and left. Outside, the evening air was crisp, the streetlights flickering on as dusk settled over the city. I walked slowly back toward the parking garage, my mind racing. Lorraine had known she'd seen this coming. And instead of confronting Preston and Daniela, instead of causing a scene, she'd quietly built a wall around me, a fortress made of paperwork and hidden accounts and locked boxes. I thought about the last conversation we'd had 2 days before she died. She'd been weak. Her voice barely a whisper, but she'd gripped my hand and said, promise me you'll trust yourself, Leonard. Don't let anyone tell you who you are. At the time, I'd thought she meant the grief, the loneliness, the inevitable questions about what came next. But now I understood. She'd been preparing me for war. When I got home, the house felt different. Not empty, transformed. I walked through the rooms, slowly seeing them with new eyes. The living room where we'd hosted dinners. The kitchen where Lorraine had taught herself to make sourdough. The bedroom where we talked late into the night about nothing and everything. It all looked the same, but it wasn't. It was like visiting a museum dedicated to a life I'd once lived. Beautiful, preserved, but no longer mine to inhabit. Preston and Daniela thought they could take it. Thought they could reduce 22 years to a dollar amount and a signature line. Thought grief had made me weak, pliable, easy to manipulate. but they were wrong. I pulled the brass key from my pocket and held it up to the dim light filtering through the curtains. It gleamed dull gold, small, and unassuming. But I knew better now. This wasn't just a key, it was a weapon. And Lorraine had left it in my hands. Tomorrow I would go to First National Bank. Tomorrow I would open whatever door this key unlocked. And tomorrow, everything would change. I stood in the center of the living room, gripping the key, feeling the weight of what was coming. Lorraine had given me the tools. She'd anticipated their greed, their entitlement, their belief that they deserved what she and I had built together. Now it was up to me to use what she'd left behind, not for revenge, for justice. The phone rang at 9:30 Wednesday morning, just as I was preparing to leave for First National Bank. I stared at the screen. Daniela Pierce. My chest tightened after 3 days of silence now. She called Leonard. Her voice was soft, almost fragile. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I set down my car keys. No. What is it? I wanted to check in on you, see how you're holding up. There was a pause long enough for me to hear traffic in the background. I know things have been tense and I'm sorry for that. Really, I said nothing. The brass key sat heavy in my pocket beside the bank card. Preston and I were talking, she continued. And we both feel terrible about how everything went down. This whole situation. It's not what any of us wanted. Mom wouldn't have wanted us fighting. Mom! The word scraped against something raw inside me. We'd like to have you over for dinner, Daniela said. Tomorrow night at Preston's place in Wellesley. Just family. A chance to sit down together, talk things through. We owe you that much. I walked to the window overlooking the street. A UPS truck idled at the corner. Across the way, Mrs. Higgins swept her front steps like she did every Wednesday. Leonard. Daniela's voice pulled me back. Will you come? Every instinct told me this was a setup, another move in whatever game they were playing. But if I refused, they'd know I suspected something. And I needed time to see what Lorraine had left in that safety deposit box. What time, I asked. 7:00. Preston's address is I know where he lives. Oh, right. Another pause. Thank you, Leonard. This means a lot to both of us. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding the phone, staring at my reflection in the dark screen. Lorraine gazed at me from the framed photo on the mantel. The two of us at Big Sur the Pacific, crashing behind us, her head on my shoulder. What are you trying to tell me I spent the rest of Wednesday researching? Preston's house was a modern colonial in Wellesley's Dover Estates, a neighborhood where lawns were measured by the acre and property taxes funded small countries. Daniela had flown in from Atlanta the night before. Her return flight wasn't until Sunday. They wanted me there, both of them together. The bank card sat on my desk beside my laptop. I'd held it under the light a dozen times trying to decode the handwritten number on the back. 10 digits. Not a phone number, not an account number I recognized. Tomorrow I'd go to First National, but tonight I'd go to Preston's. If they wanted to talk, I'd listen. If they wanted to pressure me, I'd smile and nod. And all the while I'd watch, I'd observe, I'd gather every scrap of information I could. Because Lorraine had taught me something over 22 years of marriage, the best way to understand a project was to study its foundation. Find the cracks. Identify the weak points. And Preston and Daniela, they were showing me cracks. Thursday evening, I dressed carefully. Navy tie the blazer Lorraine had bought me for our last anniversary. I slipped the brass key and bank card into my inner pocket, a talisman against whatever waited in Wellesley. The drive took 30 minutes on Route 9. I watched the neighborhoods shift from Cambridge's brick roses to Brooklyn's tree-lined streets to Wellesley's sprawling estates. Old money gave way to new money. Academic prestige gave way to corporate wealth. Preston had always belonged to this world. Even as a kid, according to Lorraine, he'd been drawn to status symbols. The right schools, the right clubs, the right car. I turned onto Dover Road. The GPS guided me past stone walls and iron gates, past houses that looked like they'd been airlifted from the Connecticut shore. Preston's place sat at the end of a cul-de-sac. Modern, colonial, just as I'd seen online but bigger in person. White clapboard, black shutters, a 3-car garage with doors that probably cost more than my first truck. In the driveway, Preston's BMW and a silver Lexus with Georgia plates. Daniela was already here. I parked behind the Lexus and sat for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. Through the front windows, I could see chandelier light the shadow of someone moving past. You can still leave a voice whispered, drive away. Go to the bank tomorrow and never look back. But Lorraine's voice was louder. When you're ready. I got out of the car. The front door opened before I reached it. Bethany stood framed in golden light, wearing a cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's mortgage payments. Her smile was bright brittle. Leonard. She air-kissed near my cheek, her perfume overwhelming. We're so glad you could make it. Please come in. I stepped into the foyer. Marble floors, a chandelier that belonged in a hotel lobby. Through the archway to my left, I could see the dining room, crystal glasses, white linens, candles already lit, and standing near the fireplace, drinks in hand, were Preston and Daniela. They turned as I entered. Leonard. Preston crossed the room, hand extended. Thank you for coming. I shook his hand. His grip was firm. Controlled a lawyer's handshake. Behind him, Daniela offered a small wave, her smile uncertain. Can I get you something to drink? Bethany asked. We have wine scotch. Water's fine. Preston's smile tightened. Of course. Make yourself comfortable. Dinner will be ready soon. A young man in a black vest appeared from the kitchen hired help. I realized he carried a tray of hors d'oeuvres that looked like art installations. I took a seat on the leather sofa, the brass key pressed against my ribs and across from me. Preston and Daniela exchanged a glance I wasn't supposed to see. Here we go, I thought. Dinner began at 7:30. Preston opened a bottle of wine that probably cost more than I used to spend on groceries in a month. The label was French, the year significant to someone who cared about such things. He poured 3 glasses white for Bethany, and Daniela red for himself. I stuck with water to Mom, Preston said, raising his glass. His voice carried that careful tone people use at funerals when they're performing grief rather than feeling it. And to family. Daniela echoed the toast. Bethany smiled and sipped. I watched them over the rim of my water glass. The meal was catered, probably seared scallops, some kind of risotto vegetables arranged like they were posing for a magazine. The young man in the vest served each course with practiced efficiency, then disappeared back into the kitchen. The estate is so complicated, Daniela said, cutting her scallop into precise pieces. So many moving parts, properties, accounts, business interests. It's overwhelming. Mom was meticulous about finances, Preston added. He swirled his wine, studied it against the candlelight, say everything documented, everything organized, but there's just so much paperwork. I nodded, said nothing. Let them fill the silence. We've been meeting with accountants all week, Bethany said. She touched Preston's arm, a gesture that looked rehearsed. Trying to get everything sorted before we leave for Turks and Chaos next month. We booked it ages ago before everything happened. We thought about canceling, but life goes on. Daniela finished softly. I set down my fork. Turks and Chaos? Nice. Mom would have wanted us to live our lives? Preston said to not get stuck in grief. Through the open door to Preston's study, I could see his desk, papers scattered across the surface, a stack of envelopes, some still sealed. The corner of one caught my eye, red lettering. Final notice. I looked back at my plate. I've been going through Lorraine's things, I said. My voice was casual, conversational, at the house, sorting her clothes, her books. It's hard, but it needs to be done. Daniela's fork paused halfway to her mouth. That must be difficult. It is. I took a sip of water. Found some papers, though, in her desk. Bank statements I didn't recognize, accounts I'd never heard of. The air in the room shifted. It was subtle, the way Preston's jaw tightened, the way Daniela's eyes flicked toward her brother. Estate accounts, Preston said smoothly. I'm sure that's all they are. Everything's being processed through probate. Maybe. I let the word hang there and I found a key. Small, brass key. Doesn't fit anything in the house? Daniela's hand trembled. Wine sloshed in her glass. A drop landing on the white tablecloth like a bloodstain. Oh, she grabbed her napkin. I'm so clumsy. What kind of key? Preston's voice had an edge now sharp beneath the lawyer's polish. I shrugged. Just a key, but Lorraine left it somewhere. I'd find it with a note. And when you're ready, she wrote. Bethany leaned forward. Ready for what I don't know yet. I met Preston's eyes, but she wanted me to find it. Why would she do that? Preston stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood. Leonard, the estate's finances are complicated. You shouldn't be digging through documents without legal counsel present. If you found paperwork, you need to turn it over to our attorney Gerald Peaton, the estate's attorney. Gerald is... He caught himself. Gerald has his own perspective, but the estate is being administered by Morrison and Associates. Interesting. I stayed seated, forced my voice to stay level because I spoke with Gerald. He said Lorraine's will should have left me certain protections under Massachusetts law, but apparently it didn't. Daniela's face had gone pale. Leonard? I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I cut her off gently. I'm just trying to understand. Lorraine and I were married 22 years. She knew I'd be vulnerable after she died, so why would she leave me that key? Why would she want me to find those bank statements? Preston's hands were clenched at his sides. You're upset. That's understandable. But you're reading things into this that aren't there. Maybe. I pushed my chair back and stood. Actually, I checked. Whatever that key opens, my name is on it too. Lorraine made sure of that. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Preston's face had gone red. Daniela stared at her plate. Bethany looked between them. Confusion and something else, fear, may be flickering across her features. I should go, I said. Thank you for dinner. Nobody moved to stop me. I walked through the foyer, aware of their eyes on my back. Behind me, I heard urgent whispers. Preston's voice low and angry. Daniela's higher frightened. Bethany caught up with me at the door. Leonard, wait. She glanced back toward the dining room. What key? What's going on? Bethany Preston's voice cut through the house like a blade. Not now. She flinched. Then she opened the door for me. Her smile gone, her eyes hollow. Good night, Leonard, she said quietly. I stepped into the cool November air. Behind me, the door clicked shut. I didn't go to my car immediately. Instead, I walked slowly down the driveway, letting the cold clear my head. Through the dining room window, I could see them, Preston, pacing, gesturing sharply. Daniela with her face in her hands. Bethany standing frozen in the doorway. They were scared. Good. Because whatever they were hiding, whatever game they thought they were playing, Lorraine had seen it coming. She'd left me that key, those bank statements, that note. When you're ready, I was ready now. I climbed into my car and drove away. In my rearview mirror, Preston's house blazed with light, a beacon of wealth and lies. Tomorrow I'd go to First National Bank. Tomorrow I'd see what Lorraine had hidden. And tomorrow everything would change. I drove home slowly, checking my mirrors every few blocks. Twice I thought I saw headlights following me, a dark sedan that hung back just far enough to seem coincidental. But when I turned onto my street in Cambridge, it disappeared. Paranoia, maybe, or maybe not. I parked in my usual spot and sat for a moment watching the house. The porch light was on just as I'd left it. The windows were dark. Everything looked normal, but something felt wrong. I climbed the front steps, key in hand. The lock turned smoothly. The door swung open. I stepped inside and flipped on the hallway light. Nothing obviously disturbed the coat rack, the mail table, Lorraine's watercolor of Big Sue still hanging on the wall, but the air felt different, violated. I moved through the first floor, pulse quickening. The living room looked untouched. The kitchen was fine, but in Lorraine's office, the desk drawers were closed but not quite flush. Papers that had been stacked neatly were slightly askew. The chair was pushed in, but at a different angle than I'd left it. Someone had been here. I checked the safe, still locked. They hadn't gotten the combination, but they'd tried. The dial was turned to a different number than where I'd left it. Upstairs, the bedroom had the same subtle wrongness. Drawers opened and closed carefully. My closet disturbed. Lorraine's jewelry box shifted an inch to the left. This wasn't a random burglary. Nothing was missing. Not the cash I kept in the nightstand. Not Lorraine's pearls. Not the laptop on the desk. They'd been searching for something specific. The key. I reached into my jacket pocket. The brass key was still there, warm against my palm. I'd carried it with me to Preston's. They'd torn my house apart looking for it. And I'd had it the whole time. Preston and Daniela? It had to be them or someone they'd hired. The realization hit me like cold water. They were desperate, and desperate people were dangerous. I stood in the bedroom surrounded by the evidence of invasion and felt rage burn through the grief and confusion. This was my home. The home I'd shared with Lorraine for 22 years. The place where we'd built our life together and they'd violated it. My phone rang. I stared at the screen. Unknown number. Again. For a moment I considered ignoring it, but something made me answer. "Hello, Dad." The voice was warm, familiar, edged with worry. "It's Alexander. I'm sorry for calling so late." The tension in my shoulders released a fraction. "Alexander, it's okay." I was awake. "I heard about what Preston and Daniela are doing." His words came fast, urgent. "A friend in Boston reached out. Dad, this isn't right. What they're trying to pull with the estate, it's not what Mom would have wanted." I sat down on the edge of the bed. "How much do you know enough to know you need help?" There was a pause. The sound of airport announcements in the background. "I'm coming home. I just wrapped a recording session in London. I can catch a flight tonight. I'll be there tomorrow afternoon Boston time." "Alexander, you don't need to." "Yes, I do." His voice was firm. "You're my father and Mom." He stopped, took a breath. "Dad, Mom called me 2 months before she died. She said things were complicated. She told me to watch out for you. She said you'd know what to do when the time came. That I should trust you." My throat tightened. "She called you." She knew something was wrong with Preston and Daniela. She didn't give me details, but I could hear it in her voice. She was protecting you. Another pause. "She told me to tell you something. If things got bad, trust yourself and don't let them make you doubt what you know is true." I looked down at the brass key in my hand. "We'll talk when I land," Alexander said. "And Dad, whatever, you found that key they're so scared of, don't let them intimidate you. Don't sign anything. Don't give them anything. I'm texting you my flight info now. Okay, I managed. I'll see you tomorrow. Hang in there." The line went dead. I sat in the silence of my ransacked bedroom, Lorraine's voice echoing in my memory. "When you're ready." She'd known. She'd planned for this. She'd even warned Alexander. My phone buzzed. A text from Alexander BA23. Arrives Logan. 3:45 p.m. Friday, tomorrow. I stood and walked back to Lorraine's office. The brass key caught the light as I turned it in my fingers. Somewhere in the city was a lock. This key would open. A safety deposit box at First National Bank if I was reading the clues right. And inside that box, what documents evidence proof of whatever Preston and Daniela were so desperate to hide? Tomorrow morning, I'd go to the bank. Tomorrow afternoon, Alexander would arrive. And tomorrow night, everything would become clear. I locked the front door, checked the windows, and went upstairs to pack the key and the bank card in a place no one would think to look the pocket of an old work jacket in the back of my closet. One I'd worn on construction sites decades ago. Let them search again if they wanted. They wouldn't find it. Outside the Cambridge street was quiet, no dark sedan, no watching eyes. But I knew they were out there. Preston and Daniela panicking, scrambling, and I knew something else too. Lorraine had given me everything I needed to fight back. I just had to be brave enough to use it. Friday morning, I arrived at First National Bank on New Street, just after 9. The building was old Boston granite facade, brass fixtures, marble floors that echoed with every footstep. I approached the receptionist. I need to speak with the manager about a safety deposit box. She picked up her phone, murmured something, then gestured toward leather chairs. Miss Patterson will be right with you. Mr. Foster? A woman in her early 50s stood before me, hand-extended kind eyes, gray hair, and a neat bun. I'm Rosemary Patterson, branch manager. Come with me. She led me into a small office. I have a key, I said, pulling it from my pocket. I believe my late wife had a safety deposit box here. Rosemary's face softened with relief. Mr. Foster? I've been waiting for you. Waiting for me. Your wife came here several times over the past 6 months. Last visit was 2 weeks before she passed. She was very specific, only her name and yours on the access list. She said you'd come when you were ready. 6 months? Lorraine had been planning this while dying. If anyone else inquired about the box, I was to tell you immediately, Rosemary added. Has anyone asked? Not yet. But I suspect they might soon. She stood. Come with me. She led me through a secured door and down marble stairs. At the bottom was a steel vault door. Rosemary unlocked it with a key and code. The door groaned open. Inside was a room lined with deposit boxes. Cool air. Heavy silence. Box 412. She walked to the back corner and unlocked the outer gate. Your key opens the box. There's a viewing room through that door, private, take your time. She retrieved the box, long metal, heavier than expected, and set it on a table in the small, windowless room. I'll be outside if you need anything, she said softly and left. I was alone. The brass key turned smoothly. The lid opened. Manila folders neatly labeled. A USB drive taped to the lid. Documents organized with Lorraine's precision. And on top, a sealed envelope. My dearest Leonard read everything else first, then opened this letter. I love you. My hands shook. I set the letter aside and opened the first folder, Foster Holdings, LLC, an account summary from a wealth management firm. The balance, 8750 Zordad or Zero Cern Lorraine's name. My name, joint signatories, opened 8 months ago. Next folder, property, liens 32 Beacon Hill. A second mortgage, 7 months ago, $2,400 signed by Lorraine. We'd paid off the house 15 years ago. Third folder, property lines, Big Sur Villa. Another mortgage, $3,500 toddlers. She'd mortgaged both properties deliberately. Fourth folder, life insurance policies. The $450,000 policy Preston mentioned, but behind it, $250,000 beneficiary Leonard Foster, a third policy, $750,000 also mine total, $2,450,000, not $450,000. Fifth folder, medical expenses, outstanding, $45,000. I sat back, mind racing. Lorraine had moved money-hidden assets, mortgaged properties, structured debt, all while dying. All to protect me. The USB drive evidence, do not lose. Finally, I reached for the letter sealed with wax. I broke it carefully and pulled out 2 pages, dated 3 weeks before she died. My dearest Leonard, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And it means Preston and Daniela have shown you exactly who they are. My vision blurred. I'm sorry, my love. I couldn't tell you while I was alive, but I needed you to see it for yourself. Everything in this box is the truth. Everything they told you is a lie. Trust Maxwell Rhodes. He'll help you finish what I started. I love you always, Lorraine. At the bottom, Maxwell Rhodes SCAT in that windowless room surrounded by evidence of my wife's final battle. Lorraine hadn't abandoned me. She'd armed me. I gathered the folders, slipped them back into the box with the USB drive. The letter I folded carefully and put in my jacket pocket close to my heart. When I emerged from the viewing room, Rosemary was waiting in the corridor. Everything all right, Mr. Foster? Yes. My voice was steadier than I expected. Thank you for waiting, for keeping this safe. She nodded. Your wife was a remarkable woman. She knew exactly what she was doing. She always did. Rosemary walked me back upstairs through the vault door, up the marble steps into the warmth of the bank lobby. Sunlight streamed through the windows outside Newberry Street, bustled with Friday morning traffic. If you need anything else, Rosemary said, please don't hesitate. I shook her hand. I will. Thank you. I walked out into the November air, the box of documents secure under my arm. In my pocket, Lorraine's letter pressed against my ribs. In my phone, Maxwell Rhodes' number waited to be dialed. And this afternoon, Alexander would land at Logan. I wasn't alone anymore. I climbed into my car and sat for a moment, engine idling, the bank behind me, the city ahead. And somewhere out there, Preston and Daniela still thinking they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. I pulled out my phone and dialed Maxwell Rhodes. It rang twice before a voice answered, Rhodes and Associates. My name is Leonard Foster, I said. I need to speak with Maxwell Rhodes. It's about Lorraine Foster's estate. A pause. Then, Mr. Foster, we've been expecting your call. I set Lorraine's letter aside. She'd told me to read everything else first and open the first folder. The tab read, Preston Wallace Investigative Report. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Preston at a casino in Reno. Chips stacked in front of him. Preston at a blackjack table in Las Vegas, drink in hand. His tie loosened. His expression animated in a way I'd never seen. Preston with men in expensive suits, at a high roller table, their faces blurred, but their body language unmistakable, predatory, calculating. The timestamp spanned 8 months. The most recent was dated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, Lorraine had still been alive. Beneath the photos were financial records, bank statements showing cash withdrawals, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, $20,000 in a single night, credit card statements with cash advances maxed out, loan applications stamped approved in red ink. And at the bottom of each application, a signature. My signature, but I'd never signed them. I flipped to the next page and found a note from the investigator, James Miller. Subject has accumulated gambling debts estimated at $560,000 across multiple creditors. High-interest loans and default payment plans, abandoned loan documents submitted to Capital Bridge Lending and Horizon Financial Bear, forged signature of Leonard Foster, co-owner of Foster Construction. Email correspondence suggests intent to use company assets as collateral without consent or knowledge of co-owner. My hands started to shake. I'd built that company 30 years of my life, brick by brick, project by project, and Preston had tried to bet it away. I forced myself to keep reading. There were emails printed, highlighted, annotated in Lorraine's careful handwriting from preston.wallacecrossmantle.com to our Garrett Capital Bridge Lending. Com date March 14th, subject Foster Construction, LLOC. We can use the construction company as collateral. My father won't notice until it's already processed. By then, we'll have restructured everything. Move fast. Window closes when Mom does. I stared at the words until they blurred. Window closes when Mom does. He'd written that while Lorraine was in hospice, while I was sitting beside her bed, reading to her, holding her hand. He'd been planning this. I closed the folder and reached for the next one, my chest tight. Daniela Pierce, investigative report, more photos. Daniela at client meetings, shaking hands with elderly couples in cardigans and sensible shoes. Daniela in her office surrounded by framed credentials, certified financial planner, investment advisor, wealth management, specialist, all impressive, all fake. The investigator's summary was even more damning than Preston's subject operates fraudulent investment advisory service under the name Pierce Financial Advisory Atlanta GA. Classic Ponzi scheme targeting retirees and elderly clients. Estimated $740,000 in tail misappropriated from client accounts between 2019-2023. Money transferred to offshore entities in Cayman Islands and British Virgin Islands. Multiple complaints filed with Georgia Securities Commission. Cease and desist orders pending. Credentials falsified. No legitimate license to operate as financial advisor. There were bank records showing the transfers, wire after wire. 50,000 here, 80,000 there, all flowing to accounts with names like Meridian Holdings, LLC, and Sapphire Trust, international shell companies, all of them. There were testimonials from victims' handwritten letters, from people who'd lost their retirement savings, their children's inheritance, their ability to pay for medical care, and more emails from Daniela Pierce. Pierce Advisory. Come to PrestonWallaceCrossmanLeal.com. Date February 18th. Subject. Mom, she's been diagnosed. Stage 4, 6 to 12 months, they said. We need to move quickly. The reply came the next day. Understood. We restructure the estate before she dies. Get everything transferred into the trust I'm setting up. What about Leonard? Daniela's response was immediate. Leonard won't be a problem. He's too passive. He'll do whatever we tell him. He always has. I had to stop reading. My vision was swimming my chest so tight I couldn't breathe. They'd written that the day after Lorraine's diagnosis. While I was still processing the word terminal, still trying to understand what 6 to 12 months meant, still bargaining with God for more time. They'd been planning how to divide the spoils. I opened the third folder with trembling hands. Conspiracy email evidence. The emails were organized chronologically, a timeline of betrayal that stretched across 9 months. February 20th, Preston to Daniela. Doctor gave her 6 to 12 months. We need to be strategic. Start moving your offshore assets now. Clean everything up before the feds come sniffing. I'll handle the estate paperwork. When she goes, we move fast. 30 days to get Leonard out of the house and into something manageable. Grief will make him compliant. April 10th, Daniela to Preston. What if Leonard doesn't cooperate? What if he fights Preston's reply he won't, and if he does, we have options. The will is airtight. Gerald helped me draft it. Leonard gets $25,000 under, and whatever's left after debts, which will be nothing. May 3rd, Preston to Daniela. Mom's asking questions about the loan applications. She saw something on a credit report. She's sharper than we thought. Daniela's response: stall her. Tell her it's identity theft and you're handling it. She's weak now. Medication is making her foggy. If she pushes, we'll say Leonard did it and didn't tell her. June 3rd, the final email. Hospice says weeks, not months, maybe days. We execute the moment she's gone. I'll have the paperwork ready. Leonard will sign. He always does what he's told. I couldn't read anymore. My hands were shaking so hard the papers rattled. My throat burned. My eyes stung. Lorraine had been dying, fading a little more each day, and they'd been circling, waiting, planning how to strip me of everything the moment she took her last breath. I sat in the vault's cold, sterile silence, surrounded by evidence so damning it felt like fiction. But it wasn't fiction. It was real. Lorraine had seen it. She'd hired James Miller. She'd gathered proof photos, emails, bank records, testimonies. She'd built an airtight case while fighting stage 4 cancer, while pretending everything was fine at family dinners, while protecting me from the truth because she knew it would destroy me And she'd left it all here for me so I would know so I could fight back. I looked at the last folder financial protection plan. I pulled it toward me, my heart pounding, and opened it. Inside was Lorraine's handwriting, a plan, a strategy, a weapon. And as I read the first line, I finally understood what she'd done. The handwriting was Lorraine's, but the tone was different from anything I'd read before. Not the warm, gentle voice I'd known for 22 years. This was strategic clinical, the voice of someone who'd seen the truth and refused to look away. Financial protection plan notes for Leonard. My dearest, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if Preston and Daniela came to you within days of my death, then everything I feared has come true. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. I wanted to. God knows I wanted to. But I needed to be certain, and I needed to protect you from the burden of knowing while I was still here. What you've seen in these folders is the truth. Preston is drowning in gambling debts. Daniela is running a scheme that's about to collapse. And together they plan to use my death and your grief to take everything. But I didn't let them. I stopped my breath caught in my throat. She'd known all of it. And instead of confronting them, instead of tearing the family apart while she was still alive, she'd quietly, methodically built a fortress around me. 7 months ago, I started moving assets. I created an entity they don't know exists. I took out mortgages on properties I own outright and made sure those debts would transfer to anyone who tried to claim them. I restructured the life insurance so that you and only you are protected. The inheritance they think they're getting, it's a trap. My hands trembled as I read those words again. A trap, not an accident, not a mistake, a deliberate, calculated trap. Here's what they'll inherit if they pursue the estate. 2 properties, beautiful, valuable, and mortgaged far beyond their worth. If they accept them, the debt transfer's foreclosure will begin within 30 days. Bankruptcy within 90. The debts Preston mentioned, they're real, but they're attached to the properties, not to you. I made sure of that. The life insurance. There are 3 policies. The one Preston knows about is small, a decoy. The real policies name you as the sole beneficiary. They'll never see a cent. The money. It's safe. All of it in an account only you can access. Maxwell Rhodes has the documentation. He'll walk you through everything. I had to set the paper down. My vision was blurring. 8.75 million. That's what the balance sheet had shown. Money I'd never known about quietly moved and protected. While Lorraine was fighting for her life, she'd built me a lifeboat and she'd loaded it with everything we'd worked for. I picked up the letter again, my throat tight. I know what you're thinking, Leonard. You're thinking this is cruel, that I should have talked to them, reasoned with them, given them a chance to be better. But I tried. I confronted Preston about the gambling 2 years ago. He promised to stop. He didn't. I asked Daniela about the complaints from her clients. She told me they were lies. They weren't. I gave them chances over and over, and they chose greed. So I chose you. Tears blurred the page. Now I wiped them away and kept reading. This isn't about revenge, it's about consequences. They wanted to take what we built together and leave you with nothing. Now they'll face the results of their own choices. You have options, my love. Option 1, let the will stand as written. They inherit the properties and the debts. You walk away clean with the money I've protected for you. Option 2, contest the will and expose everything, the fraud, the gambling, the forgery. Maxwell can help with that. It will be public ugly, but it will be the truth. Option 3, offer them a deal. Let them sign away their claims in exchange for you not pursuing criminal charges. Maxwell has prepared the documents. The choice is yours. I trust you to make it. But Leonard, please don't let guilt make you weak. Don't let their tears or their excuses change what you know to be true. They were willing to destroy you. Don't let them. The letter was signed with a single initial L, and beneath it a postscript PS. There's a bench by the Charles River where we used to sit on Friday afternoons. When you're ready to say goodbye, meet me there. I left something for you. I sat in the vault for a long time, the letter in my hands, the weight of Lorraine's love and strategy pressing down on me. She'd seen the danger, she'd anticipated their moves, and she'd armed me with everything I needed to fight back. Not with anger, with information, not with vengeance, with justice. Around me, the evidence lay scattered. Preston's gambling receipts, Daniela's wire transfers, the emails plotting my downfall, the plan that would turn their greed against them. Lorraine had spent her final months building this. While I'd been reading to her, bringing her tea, holding her hand, through the worst of the pain she'd been working, protecting, preparing. I thought about the last conversation we'd had 2 days before she died. She'd been so weak her voice was barely audible, but she'd gripped my hand with surprising strength and said, "Promise me you'll trust yourself, Leonard. Don't let anyone tell you who you are." At the time, I'd thought she meant the grief, the loneliness, the inevitable questions about identity and purpose after loss. But now I understood she'd been preparing me for this moment, for the discovery, for the choice I would have to make. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the folder. Then I gathered everything: the investigators' reports, the conspiracy emails, the financial plan, the business card for Maxwell Roads, and stood. My legs were unsteady, but my mind was clear. Rosemary was waiting outside, her expression patient and kind. "Find what you needed?" she asked gently. I nodded. "Yes, thank you. Will you be closing the box?" "Not yet," I said. "I may need to come back." She nodded and walked me to the elevator. As I stepped out onto Newberry Street, the afternoon sun was bright and sharp. The city moved around me, people rushing to appointments, cars honking at intersections, life continuing as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Lorraine had given me a choice, and she'd given me the tools to make it. The question now wasn't whether I was strong enough to use them. The question was what kind of man I wanted to be when this was over. I thought about Preston's confident smile 3 days ago. Daniela's sympathetic hand on my arm. The way they'd handed me documents as if I were a child who needed guidance. They'd underestimated me. They'd thought grief would make me compliant. They'd thought I would sign whatever they put in front of me and fade quietly into the background of their plans. They were wrong. And tomorrow I would start showing them exactly how wrong they were. I left the vault around noon, the documents secure in a leather briefcase Rosemary had provided. My hands had stopped shaking. My breathing had steadied. I walked up the marble stairs into the bank lobby, blinking against the brightness, and stopped. Alexander was standing there, tall, late 30s, dressed in the casual elegance of someone who'd spent half his life in recording studios and concert halls. Quality jeans, a charcoal blazer over a simple black shirt, a leather messenger bag slung across his shoulder. His eyes, Lorraine's eyes, kind and observant, were tired from the overnight flight, but they lit up when they found me. Dad. Alexander. He crossed the lobby in 3 strides and pulled me into a hug. Long, tight, wordless. I felt something in my chest crack the armor I'd been wearing since Lorraine died. When we finally stepped back, Rosemary was standing at a discreet distance, giving us space. "Thank you," I told her, "for everything." She nodded, smiled gently, and returned to her desk. Alexander and I walked out into the November sunshine. "There's a cafe down the block," I said. "We need to talk. Lead the way." We found a quiet place on Newberry Street, tucked between an art gallery and a bookstore. Small tables exposed brick, the smell of espresso and fresh pastries. We took a corner booth, ordered coffee. Alexander studied me across the table. "You look like you've seen a ghost?" "In a way, I have." I set the briefcase on the seat beside me. "Lorraine's ghost, her plan." "Tell me." So I did. I kept it brief. No need to repeat every detail I'd read in that vault. But I told him about Preston's gambling debts, Daniela's investment fraud, the forged signatures on loan documents, using Foster Construction as collateral. I told him about the emails, the conspiracy they'd plotted while Lorraine was dying in a hospital bed, and then I told him about Lorraine's counterattack, the hidden money, the debt trap, the real will versus the fake one. The evidence she'd gathered, the attorney she'd hired without anyone knowing. Alexander's face darkened with each revelation. They did this while she was in the hospital. His voice was quiet, controlled, but I could hear the fury beneath it. I nodded. I tried to help when she got sick, Alexander said. I called Preston, offered to pay for experimental treatments, private care, whatever she needed. He said no. Said the family would handle it. I thought he meant we'd all carry the burden together. He looked down at his coffee. But he just didn't want me involved in the estate because you would have seen what they were doing. I should have pushed harder. I should have. You were on tour in Europe, I said firmly. You came home for the funeral. That's more than they did even when she was alive. Alexander's jaw tightened. He picked up his coffee, sat it down without drinking. Preston used to be different, he said quietly. When we were kids, he was not warm exactly, but decent, responsible. And Daniela was sweet. She'd bake cookies, send birthday cards. He shook his head. I don't know when it changed. Money changes people, or reveals who they always were. Silence settled between us. Around us, the cafe hummed with Friday afternoon energy. Students on laptops, couples sharing pastries, a world that felt impossibly normal. When Mom called me 2 months ago, Alexander said she didn't give me details, but she said if anything happened to you, if Preston and Daniela tried something, I should come home immediately. She said you'd need help. She was right, she usually was. A sad smile crossed his face. She also told me something else. She said, Alexander, your father is stronger than he thinks, but he spent 22 years being kind. Sometimes kindness looks like weakness to cruel people. Don't let them mistake one for the other. My throat tightened. Shashi knew you'd fight back? Alexander continued. She just wanted to make sure you had the weapons to do it. I thought of the folders in my briefcase, the evidence, the hidden accounts, the trap Lorraine had so carefully constructed. What do we do now? Alexander asked. There's an attorney, Maxwell Rhodes. Lorraine left his card. I think we need to see him today. Today, Alexander nodded. Then let's go together. Together. We paid for the coffee and walked out into the afternoon. The sun was high now, warming the brick sidewalks of Newberry Street. Shoppers strolled past boutique windows. A street musician played saxophone on the corner. Life going on, oblivious to the battle being waged in wills and bank vaults. Dad Alexander glanced at me as we walked. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you for not just rolling over for fighting. I haven't done anything yet. You found the key, you went to the bank, you're still standing. He adjusted his messenger bag. That's more than they expected. We turned onto Federal Street. Office buildings rose around us, glass and granite reaching toward the sky. Maxwell Rhodes's office was in a tower at the corner, older than the banks around it, but solid. Respectable, we stopped at the entrance. Ready? Alexander asked. I thought of Lorraine, of her final letter, of the words she'd written live. Leonard, live fully for both of us. Ready, I said. We walked through the revolving doors together. For the first time since Lorraine died, I didn't feel alone. Friday afternoon. Leonard and Alexander stood outside a modest building on Federal Street in downtown Boston. The brass plaque beside the entrance read, Rhodes and Associates, Attorneys at Law. We took the elevator to the 5th floor. The reception area was small but professional, dark wood furniture, framed law degrees, a view of the financial district through tall windows. The receptionist looked up and smiled. Mr. Foster, Mr. Rhodes is expecting you. Go right in. She gestured toward a heavy oak door. Maxwell Rhodes stood as we entered, early 60s, silver hair combed back, sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore a navy suit that had seen better days but was impeccably pressed. There was a quiet confidence about him, the kind that came from decades of courtroom battles. Mr. Foster. He extended his hand. His grip was firm, warm. Alexander, please sit. We took the chairs across from his desk. The office was lined with law books, case files stacked with military precision. On the credenza behind him, a photograph of a younger, Rhodes with a woman and 2 children, family. I've been waiting for this meeting, Maxwell said, settling into his chair. Your wife was one of the most intelligent clients I've ever had the privilege to represent. How long did you work with her? I asked. She hired me 8 months ago after she discovered the irregularities. The conspiracy, Alexander said flatly. Maxwell nodded. Yes, let me walk you through the timeline. He opened a folder on his desk, organized, annotated everything Lorraine would have approved of. Lorraine first suspected Preston and Daniela were planning something about 9 months ago. Small things, financial questions, they asked their sudden interest in the estate structure. She hired a private investigator, James Miller. Excellent work, and he uncovered everything. The gambling, I said. The fraud, Alexander added. The forgeries Maxwell finished, and the emails, the conspiracy they were orchestrating while she was dying. He leaned back in his chair. Lorraine came to me with all the evidence. She asked me to evaluate her options. And what were they? I asked. Option 1, criminal prosecution, file charges, let the state handle it. Maxwell's expression was somber. She refused. She said, they're still my children. I won't destroy them, but I won't let them destroy Leonard either. Alexander's jaw tightened. Option 2. Maxwell continued. Was financial justice create a structure that would protect you, Mr. Foster, while ensuring Preston and Daniela faced consequences proportional to their actions? The debt trap, I said. Precisely. Maxwell pulled out another document. We moved assets into Foster Holdings LLC. Completely legal, completely clean. They can't trace it. The account is in your name and Lorraine's joint signatories. It became active 7 months ago, and the mortgages on the properties. Lorraine took those out deliberately. She mortgaged the Boston house and the big sewer villa beyond their market value. If Preston and Daniela inherit those properties, they inherit debt that will bankrupt them within months. And the wills, Alexander asked. Maxwell smiled thinly. Ah, yes. Lorraine created 2 wills. The first, a decoy she allowed to be filed through Gerald Peaton's office. That will leaves the properties to Preston and Daniela with minimal provisions for your father. Gerald doesn't know. I asked. Gerald Peaton is a good man, but his firm has a leak a paralegal Preston befriended years ago. Lorraine discovered this. She quietly stopped using Gerald's firm for sensitive matters and came to me. Gerald has no idea the will in his possession is outdated. And the real will? I asked. Maxwell opened his safe and withdrew a sealed envelope. He laid it on the desk. This is the real will, executed 6 weeks before Lorraine died. Properly witnessed, notarized, legally unassailable. It supersedes anything filed with Gerald's office. He slid it across the desk to me. I broke the seal, read the first page. I, Lorraine Foster, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath all assets, properties, and accounts to my husband, Leonard Foster. To she left me everything, I said quietly. With one stipulation, Maxwell said, you have sole discretion to gift the Boston and Big Sioux properties to Preston and Daniela. If you choose to do so, those gifts include all associated debts and obligations. Alexander leaned forward. So Dad can give them the properties loaded with debt, or give them nothing at all? Correct. Either way they lose, I said. Either way, they face the consequences of their choices. Maxwell folded his hands. If they accept the properties, the debt transfers with ownership. They'll face foreclosure within 3 to 6 months. 6. Their creditors' gambling debts fraud, victims will come after them simultaneously. Total exposure approximately 1.3 million. And if they refuse the gift, then they inherit nothing from the estate, and their existing creditors will still pursue them. Either path leads to the same destination. I sat back processing. Around us, the office was silent except for the faint hum of traffic 5 stories below. Lorraine believed in consequences, Maxwell said softly. This was her form of justice. Alexander looked at me. What do you want to do, Dad? I thought of the emails. Preston's contempt. He's too soft. He won't fight back. I thought of Daniela's cruelty. Mom's confused from the medication. I thought of Lorraine spending her final weeks building this fortress to protect me. I met Maxwell's eyes. I want to finish what Lorraine started, I said. Justice her way. Maxwell nodded slowly. Then we'll need to move quickly. Preston and Daniela will figure out something's wrong soon. When they do, they'll fight. Let them, Alexander said. His voice was still. Maxwell stood and extended his hand again. Then let's begin. Maxwell nodded and began spreading documents across the conference table. Alexander and I leaned forward watching as he laid out the battle plan with methodical precision. Here's how we proceed, Maxwell said. We let them think they've won until the very last moment. He arranged the papers like chess pieces. Step 1, I contact Gerald Peaton tonight. I'll inform him that I was Lorraine's actual attorney for the past 8 months. He'll be shocked, but he'll cooperate. Gerald was deceived, not complicit. Will he believe you, I asked. I have documentation. Lorraine left a letter for him explaining everything, why she switched firms, why she kept it secret. Gerald's a professional. Once he sees the evidence, he'll understand. Maxwell tapped the next document. Step 2. We schedule a final settlement meeting at Gerald's office, neutral territory. Preston and Daniela will expect a simple signing ceremony transferring assets, closing the estate. Instead, they'll walk into a reckoning. When Alexander asked, Next Friday, 1 week from today, 2:00. Why wait a week? I asked. Preparation. I need to coordinate with Gerald, draft the documents, ensure everything is airtight. And Maxwell glanced at Alexander. I believe we have an advantage. They don't know about me. Alexander said you. Maxwell smiled slightly. They think Leonard is alone and vulnerable. Your presence arriving mid-meeting will shatter that illusion. He outlined Alexander's role. Don't attend from the start. Wait in a private office. Maxwell would text a signal, then walk in during the confrontation. Psychological impact, Maxwell explained. The successful son they dismissed will witness their collapse. It will compound their humiliation. I can do that, Alexander said quietly. I shifted in my seat. What about criminal charges, the fraud, the forged signatures? Maxwell's expression grew somber. We have evidence, but prosecution would require Lorraine's testimony, which we no longer have. The cases would be difficult, outcomes uncertain. Civil fraud charges could work, but they'd take years. He tapped the stack of documents. This way the consequences are immediate. Financial collapse is more certain than jail time. Mom chose the guaranteed option. Alexander said, Your mother was pragmatic. She knew this would hurt them more than prison. Their reputations, their lifestyles, their illusions of success, all destroyed. Maxwell pulled out specific documents and explained each one, gift deeds transferring the properties with the debt attached, debt assumption agreements they must sign accepting all obligations. Release documents. Leonard is freed from any estate liability. Evidence packets everything they need to see to understand what they've walked into. He spread financial summaries across the table. When they see these numbers, 9 million in debt versus 4.75 million in assets, they'll realize the trap. What if they refuse everything I asked? Then they leave with nothing. And within 30 to 60 days, their existing creditors will file lawsuits, wage garnishments, asset seizures, bankruptcy. Either path leads to ruin. Silence settled over the conference table. Through the window, Boston's financial district gleamed in the afternoon sun towers of glass and steel, where fortunes were made and lost every day. Alexander spoke carefully. "And Dad, are you absolutely certain once we do this, there's no going back? They were Mom's children." I looked at my son, at Maxwell, then down at the documents spread before me. "They made their choice when they conspired against Lorraine while she was dying. I said when they forged my signature, when they called me too soft in their emails, when they planned to throw me out of my own home within 30 days of her death." My voice was steady, quiet, final. They chose greed. Lorraine chose justice. So do I. Maxwell nodded. "Then it's decided." "The meeting is next Friday, 2:00. I'll contact Gerald tonight. He'll be surprised, but he'll understand once I explain. In the meantime, you two should prepare yourselves. This will be difficult emotionally." "I mean, we know," Alexander said. Maxwell gathered the documents and returned them to his briefcase. "One more thing between now and Friday. Preston and Daniela may try to contact you, Leonard. They may sense something's wrong. Don't engage. Don't answer their calls. Let them wonder. I can do that." "Good." Chwam Maxwell stood and extended his hand. "Gentlemen, we have our plan. 1 week from today, justice will be served. Lorraine's way." Alexander and I left the office and took the elevator down. The descent felt longer than the ascent waited with what we just set in motion. On the street, Alexander turned to me. "You okay?" "No." I said honestly, "But I will be." We walked to where I'd parked on Federal Street. The November air was crisp, the sun already low on the horizon. Friday afternoon traffic hummed around us. "Where are you staying?" I asked. "I was going to get a hotel, but stay at the house. Your old room is still there." Lorraine never let me change it. Alexander smiled sadly. "I'd like that." We climbed into my car. As I started the engine, Alexander asked quietly, "Dad, are you ready for this?" I thought of Lorraine's letter. Her final words, "Live, Leonard. Live fully for both of us." "I have to be," I said, "for Lorraine." I pulled out into traffic and we drove toward Cambridge together. Behind us in his fifth-floor office, Maxwell Rhodes was already drafting the documents that would bring Preston and Daniela's world crashing down. 1 week, 7 days until everything changed. Friday too was. I walked into Gerald Peaton's conference room and stopped. Preston, Daniela, and Bethany were already seated around the mahogany table. Preston wore a crisp suit posture, relaxed, confident. Bethany scrolled through her phone, bored. Daniela offered me a nervous smile. "Leonard." Preston gestured to an empty chair. "Good. Let's get this done quickly." Gerald stood near the window, expression troubled. "Before we begin, there's someone you all need to meet." The door opened. Maxwell Rhodes stepped inside, briefcase in hand. "Good afternoon. I'm Maxwell Rhodes, the actual attorney for Lorraine Foster's estate." Preston's smile froze. "What Gerald handles our Mr. Peaton was dismissed 2 months before Mrs. Foster's death," Maxwell said calmly. He set his briefcase on the table and opened it with deliberate precision. Gerald spoke quietly. "Leonard, I'm truly sorry. I had no idea." Maxwell cut in. "There was a leak at Mr. Peaton's firm. Mrs. Foster discovered it and transferred representation to me. Gerald bears no fault. He simply wasn't informed." Preston stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. The will is clear. Let's discuss the actual will, shall we?" Maxwell connected his laptop to the conference room screen. 2 wills appeared side by side. The first, dated 8 months ago, filed with Mr. Peaton's office. The second, dated 6 weeks before Mrs. Foster's death, held in my custody. Under Massachusetts law, the later will supersedes all previous versions. Preston's face reened. She wasn't in her right mind by then. Maxwell clicked to the next slide. A medical report appeared. Neurological evaluation 3 months before her death. Dr. Ellen Hartwell, Mass General. Conclusion misses. Foster was fully competent, lucid, and capable of making legal decisions. In fact, she was extraordinary. Daniela's hands gripped the table edge. Maxwell continued, methodical, and devastating crime evidence appeared on screen. Photographs of Preston at casinos Reno, Las Vegas, Atlantic City. Financial records showing $560,000 teams in gambling debts. Loan applications with my forged signature projected beside my genuine signatures for comparison. Preston opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Next, Daniela's fraud. Client statements showing missing funds $740,000, misappropriated wire transfers to offshore accounts. Daniela's face went white. Then the emails. Maxwell read them aloud, voice flat and professional. Mom's diagnosis is stage 4, 6 to 12 months. We need to restructure the estate before she dies. What about Leonard? Leonard won't be a problem. He's too passive. Mom's asking questions. Stall her. She's weak. The medication keeps her confused. As soon as she's gone, we move fast. Get Leonard out within 30 days. He won't resist. Daniela began to cry. Preston sat rigid, jaw clenched. All admissible in court. Maxwell said, I could file criminal charges today. Wire fraud, forgery, elder abuse, or we can discuss the inheritance you're so eager to claim. A new spreadsheet appeared. Boston house, $200,000. Mortgage, $2,400, $1,000. Big Sioux Villa $600,000 to $50,000. Mortgage, $3,500,000. Total assets, $4,750,000. Total debt, $5,900,000. Net value negative, $150,000. Your mother mortgaged everything 6 months ago, Maxwell said. So you're not inheriting wealth? You're inheriting debt. Preston stared at the numbers. We refuse. We won't accept this. Then you receive nothing from the estate, Maxwell replied. And your personal creditors, totaling $1.3 million between you, will file lawsuits within 60 days. Wage garnishments, asset seizures, bankruptcy. Either way, you lose. The conference room door opened. Alexander walked in. Preston and Daniela turned, stunned. Alexander, Daniela whispered. Oh, what are you doing here? Alexander's expression was cold, controlled. I'm here for my father, the only person in this family who actually cared about me. We're family, Preston started. No, Alexander's voice cut like steel. You stopped being family when you abandoned Mom in the hospital, when you spent her final months plotting to rob her husband. Mom called me 2 months before she died. She told me to protect Dad. She knew exactly what you were. I stood. The room fell silent. I looked at Preston, then Daniela. 22 years of patience, kindness, hope, all stripped away, leaving only truth. 22 years, I said quietly. I tried to be your father. Paid for college, provided startup capital, showed up for every milestone. And while Lorraine was dying, you were scheming. She knew all of it, and she gave me this choice. I pushed documents across the table. Sign these papers, accept the properties and their debts, or walk away with nothing and face your creditors alone. You have 5 minutes to decide. Silence. Daniela reached for my hand. Leonard, please. I'm so sorry. I pulled my hand back. You're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. Preston's hands shook as he picked up a pen. This is extortion. No, Maxwell corrected. This is consequence. Preston signed. Then Daniela. Bethany stood abruptly and walked out without a word. Preston and Daniela followed, defeated, silent. The door closed. Gerald exhaled. Leonard. I'm so sorry. I had no idea about the leak. I know, Gerald. Thank you for your integrity. Maxwell began packing his briefcase. They have 30 days before foreclosure proceedings begin. Bankruptcy within 90. Alexander put his hand on my shoulder. Mom would be so proud of you. I looked at the empty chairs where Preston and Daniela had expected victory and found ruin instead. I hope so, I said quietly. Maxwell clicked off the projector. The conference room returned to its ordinary appearance, just a table, chairs, windows, overlooking Federal Street. But everything had changed. It's over, Maxwell said. I nodded. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt like I could breathe. 3 months later, I stood on the deck of my new home in Metairie, California, watching the Pacific Ocean catch the morning light. The house was modest, but beautiful, weathered cedar shingles, wide windows, a small garden where succulents grew between coastal rocks. Not big, sir. That place held too many memories. This was somewhere new, somewhere mine. I sipped my coffee and breathed the salt air. Morning had become my favorite time. The world quiet, the horizon endless. Peace. So much had changed. I'd sold both properties before foreclosure could claim them. The Boston house and the Big Sioux villa. Paid off the mortgages Lorraine had taken out. Kept a small amount from what remained. Foster Construction I'd sold to my longtime foreman and crew. They'd worked beside me for decades. They deserved it. Then I'd packed what mattered and driven west. Threes and M to start over. The $8.75 million from Foster Holdings sat in investments managed by Maxwell's recommended firm. I lived modestly off the interest. I thought about Preston and Daniela sometimes. Not often. Preston had filed for bankruptcy. His law license was suspended. Court-ordered gambling counseling. He was living in a studio apartment in Somerville working as a paralegal. Daniela had shuttered her business. Client lawsuits were ongoing. She'd separated from her husband, moved to Atlanta, taken a retail job. Bethany had divorced Preston within 6 weeks, moved to Los Angeles, and remarried. She'd landed on her feet. I felt no triumph in their collapse, just closure. Alexander visited often. Our relationship had deepened into real friendship. Father and son, yes, but also two men who respected each other. I'd found small ways to honor Lorraine. I volunteered at a community center, mentoring widowers, navigating grief men who'd lost their anchors and didn't know how to move forward. I'd established a scholarship at Boston University in Lorraine's name for architecture students who showed both talent and character. Not a large foundation, something personal. Allison Rhodes had invited me to speak at a support group for victims of financial abuse. I was considering it. The letter had arrived 2 days ago, handwritten several pages, a worn envelope with a Georgia postmark. It sat on my kitchen table for 48 hours before I opened it. Daniela wrote that she wasn't asking for money or forgiveness. She just wanted me to know she was sorry, truly sorry. Greed had destroyed everything. She'd destroyed everything. She'd betrayed me and Lorraine. She'd become someone she didn't recognize. She was in therapy now, trying to make amends to clients she'd defrauded. Most wouldn't speak to her. She was working retail. It was humbling but honest work. She and Preston didn't speak anymore. They blamed each other. She wished she could go back and be the daughter Lorraine had tried to raise, but she couldn't. So she was trying to live better now. Not for me, for herself. She didn't expect forgiveness. She just wanted me to know she was sorry. I read it 3 times, then stared at the ocean for an hour. Finally, I wrote back. I'd received her letter. I appreciated her honesty. I didn't hate her. I never had. But there were bridges that once burned could never be rebuilt. I couldn't trust her again, and I didn't think I ever would. I wished her well in rebuilding her life, but from a distance. I hoped she found peace. I mailed it that afternoon. Felt neither satisfaction nor regret, just closure. That evening, Alexander arrived. We ate dinner on the deck. Grilled fish, wine, comfortable silence. "Do you think Mom would approve?" Alexander asked quietly of how everything turned out. I watched the waves. I think she'd be sad it had to come to this. But yes, she chose justice over mercy. So did I. You did the right thing, Dad. I did what she asked. Now I need to do what she wanted. I looked at him. Live. Alexander smiled. You're doing that. I'm trying. We sat in silence. The sun sank lower, painting the ocean gold and crimson. Pelicans glided past. A couple walked along the beach below, hand in hand. Life continuing, beautiful, endless. Dad. Alexander sat down his wine glass. There's something I need to show you. Something Mom told me about before she died. My heart quickened. What a place. She said when you were ready to say goodbye, really say goodbye, you'd know where to go. But she left something there. A message. My throat tightened. The bench by the Charles River. Alexander nodded. She made me promise not to tell you until you were ready, until you'd moved forward and built a new life. He looked at me carefully. I think you're ready now. I thought of Lorraine's letter from the safety deposit box. Her final postscript. Remember our bench by the Charles River. When you're ready to say goodbye, go there. I left something for you. 3 months. I'd built a new life here. Found peace in ocean waves and morning coffee. Honored her memory through scholarships and mentoring. Made my son a true part of my life. Maybe it was time to say a proper goodbye. When I asked, whenever you want, I'll go with you. I looked out at the Pacific vast and eternal, then thought of the Atlantic 3,000 IRM away, of a bench beside a river where Lorraine and I had watched seasons change for 22 years. Next week I said, let's go back to Boston together. Alexander reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Together. The sun touched the horizon. The day ended, another would begin. And somewhere in Boston, on a bench overlooking the Charles River, Lorraine's final message waited for me. 1 year, exactly 1 year since Lorraine died. Alexander and I arrived in Boston on a spring morning when the world felt new again. April in Boston, crisp air, brilliant sky cherry blossoms beginning their brief bloom. We walked along the Charles River Esplanade in comfortable silence. My familiar path, the one Lorraine and I had walked every Friday evening for 22 years. Cherry trees lined the walkway, their branches heavy with pale pink blossoms. Petals drifted down, with each breeze carpeting the ground in soft color. There, I said, quietly pointing ahead. Our bench, the wooden bench facing the River Boston skyline, reflected in the water beyond. I stopped a few feet away suddenly, unable to move closer. Alexander waited, respecting the moment. Every Friday evening, I said, my voice thick. For 22 years, rain or shine, this was our time. We'd walk here, sit on this bench, talk about everything and nothing. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. We just existed together. I took a breath and stepped forward. We sat down side by side. The old carving was still there, weathered, but legible. LF plus LF, always together. I traced the letters with my fingertips. Dad? Alexander said softly, look, there's something new. A small brass plaque had been mounted beside the old carving. I read aloud, my voice breaking. Even when apart, we walked together. Live fully, my love. L. The date beneath it was 1 week before Lorraine died. When did Alexander's eyes were wet? Some mom called me 6 weeks before she died, asked me to have this made and installed. She said, when he comes back here, he needs to know I've released him. That I want him to live, not just exist. He paused. I had it mounted 2 months ago. I was waiting for you to be ready. Cherry blossoms began to fall, more heavily carried on a spring breeze. Like pink snow, they drifted across the water, settled on the bench, caught in my hair. One petal landed in my open palm, fragile, perfect, fleeting. She's here, I whispered. A memory surfaced, vivid, achingly clear. Lorraine laughing on this bench a spring day years ago. cherry blossoms in her dark hair, her hand warm in mine. This is happiness, Leonard. This moment right here, it's all we need. I'm living, Lorraine, I whispered to the wind. I promise. I'm living for both of us. From my jacket pocket, I pulled out white tulips, the flowers from our wedding. I placed them gently at the base of the bench. Alexander put his hand on my shoulder. We sat in comfortable silence around us. Life continued. Joggers passed. Families with children, young couples holding hands, an elderly pair walking a golden retriever, the world moving forward, beautiful, endless. So thank you for being here. I said, always, Dad. That's what real family does. We show up for each other. Preston and Daniela never understood that. I said, family isn't bloodline, it's choice. It's showing up. It's love. More cherry blossoms fell spinning in the wind. Mom loved these trees, Alexander said. She told me they reminded her that beautiful things don't have to last forever to matter. I nodded, tears flowing freely. She was right. We sat longer unhurried. Finally, we stood and walked slowly back along the path. We passed the small cafe, our old Friday tradition. Coffee, I asked. Lorraine would want us to celebrate her, not mourn. Alexander smiled. She absolutely would. Inside the cafe was warm, fragrant, familiar. We ordered, found a corner table. You know what I realized? I said, I spent so much time afraid of losing her. Then I lost her, and I survived more than survived. She made sure of that. She loved you so much, I know, and I loved her. Still do. But I'm learning that love doesn't end just because life ends. It just changes form. Outside the window, cherry blossoms swirled past. I smiled a real smile. She's here in the blossoms in this coffee in you. In the life she protected for me. We finished our coffee and walked back to the hotel. That evening we had dinner with Maxwell and Allison. Stories were shared. Laughter echoed. Life was honored. The next morning, Alexander and I flew back to California. A few weeks later, I stood on my deck in Materi morning coffee, in hand watching the Pacific catch the sunrise. Alexander was visiting guitar in his lap, playing softly a new composition about memory and renewal. Allison had called. The mentorship program was thriving. Would I speak at a conference in the fall? I'd said yes. My phone buzzed. A photo from Boston cherry blossoms in full bloom along the Esplanade. I smiled and set it as my wallpaper. Life full of simple beauty. Not the life I'd planned, but a good life. A life worth living. People say grief never really ends. They're right, but neither does love. Lorraine was gone, but she was everywhere in sunsets, in flowers, in acts of kindness, in Alexander's smile and cherry blossoms. Preston and Daniela had tried to take everything, but they couldn't take what mattered most. 22 years of love, the memories that sustained me, the strength she'd built in me. Some stories end with revenge. This one ends with something better, peace, acceptance, and the knowledge that love transcends death. I'm living now, really living, not just existing. For me, for Lorraine, for both of us. I looked out at the Pacific, vast, eternal, beautiful. The cherry blossom photo glowed on my phone. I whispered into the ocean breeze, "Thank you, my love, for everything." For the years we had for this protection, for teaching me that real family is built on love, not bloodline, for giving me Alexander, for giving me the freedom to live again. The wind carried my words away. I smiled and turned back to life. Looking back at my family story, I realized God places people in our lives to teach us what love truly means, and sometimes what it doesn't. When family betrayal strikes, when those you raised turn against, you remember God sees everything. He saw Lorraine's pain, my struggle, and provided a path to justice. Don't be like I was passive, trusting, blindly ignoring warning signs of family betrayal. I thought silence was strength, but God gives us wisdom to protect ourselves, and sometimes that wisdom demands action. Lorraine understood this. She didn't wait for miracles, she became one. The lesson from my family story isn't about revenge, it's about consequences. Preston and Daniela chose greed over love. They exploited family bonds for gain. But God's justice always arrives. Lorraine ensured truth prevailed, that real love was honored over bloodline manipulation. If you're facing family betrayal, don't suffer in silence. Document everything, seek wise counsel, protect what you've built. Trust that God will guide you toward people who truly deserve your love, like Alexander, who proved real family is chosen, not inherited. This family story taught me that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go of those who hurt you and embracing those who cherish you. God brought Alexander back into my life. He brought Maxwell Rhodes. He brought peace after the storm. Now I want to hear your story. Have you faced betrayal from family? How did you survive? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire and heal. Thank you for listening. God bless you all.